towards the end of 2022, we saw the Medibank breach and obviously the Optus breach, and that's just resulted in a huge requirement for things like assurance testing, remediation, all those sorts of services. So a lot of partners have got their technical people, fully utilized, and they're struggling.
Welcome to Insights as a Service. This week, I am joined by John Milionis, Director, Head of Channels and Alliances, ANZ for Zscaler. John, how are you going?
Mate, I'm fabulous, Brendan. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you. Look forward to the conversation.
I'm just thinking, did I just immediately screw up your last name? Milionis. Milionis is, I think, what I said. So sorry, I immediately stuffed that up. Hey, look, so we've got you on because Zscaler has a very strong channel play across Australia and New Zealand when it comes to MSPs, understanding the challenges they're facing, working with them to resolve some of those issues. You're really well placed to come in and talk about that. So as we kick off 2023, I wanted to bring you in and pick your brains. So let's kick off with just setting the scene this year, the competitive landscape in ANZ. What do you see being the major forces at play? What do you see being both the challenges and opportunities for MSPs?
Yeah, well, let's kick 2023 off with an easy one. Look, I think I'll talk to some of the business challenges perhaps that I'm seeing in amongst our MSPs, and they range from the large service providers, Brendan, through to the big system integrators, through to the globals, through to the smaller mid-sized VARs that sort of typify the Australian marketplace. So it's a pretty broad spectrum, and some of the challenges that I've been hearing from the owners of those businesses or the directors of those businesses are quite common. One of them is the big skill shortage. So and the utilisation of their people. So everyone's struggling to find good quality people. I guess we're fortunate enough to be in an ecosystem that's thriving and heavily in demand, being cybersecurity. But it's having a lot of knock-on issues. So towards the end of 2022, we saw the Medibank breach and obviously the Optus breach, and that's just resulted in a huge requirement for things like assurance testing, remediation, all those sorts of services. So a lot of partners have got their technical people, fully utilized, and they're struggling. They're also, there's been a huge transition, the washout from COVID with the whole re-engineering of how we work as people and employees, and therefore re-architecting, connectivity and security. So there's a lot of those projects on the go as well. So, our partners that I'm seeing are really fully stretched, and they're really struggling for people. So the flow-on effect for that, I think, is the challenge around how they introduce new services or take advantage of new opportunities out in the marketplace. Because in order to do that successfully, and even Zscaler partners, you've got to have a certain amount of technical capability and understanding. And when you've got resources that are really really stretched, really hard to find, obviously very significant investments for any MSP. Trying to free those people up to work with a new vendor or try and create a new service line solution, managed service, is a real problem. So I'm finding one of the bottlenecks is actually just how do we move to the services that our customers want.
That's it. So when you've got people working at capacity, or it's just difficult to find people with a cybersecurity background, or systems engineers in general, the idea of going, right, I found a vendor, whether it's Zscaler or someone else who has a certification program, the idea that I can just go, hey, everyone, tools down, please get certified to, this minimum tier or perhaps an advanced tier, just isn't particularly possible for a lot of companies at the moment, a lot of MSPs. So how do MSPs get around that, whether they're looking again at Zscaler or something else that has a certification program? I know ourselves at Lightwire, we've just gone through the certification program with Zoom, for example, right? And that was quite onerous, I think, across both our technical, sales, provisioning, support teams. There was a lot. And so what solutions are there to get around the need to upskill your team when you just don't have that resource?
Yeah. So there's a few aspects to that. The first one that I'd call out, Brendan, is what is the available market opportunity for a partner, to even make that investment. And I don't define that as, let's go and get some pipeline together, because, what I do hear a lot is, partners will say, okay, let's go and build some pipeline, and that will sort of build the run rate required to start investing in our people investing in services and certifications progressively. But I'm always interested in, it's not the first opportunity we work on jointly, it's the second and the third. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the impact that we can make as a vendor on the partner business. And does it really stack up? And it's a real sort of challenge for VARs, because
Sorry, let's just define that. So just so anyone doesn't know VAR, and obviously I know, but just for anyone else.
Yeah. Value-added reseller, MSP, sorry, interchangeable. I'm kind of wearing my American hat versus the Australian hat, but let's just call them MSPs. Sales teams will often go out there and they'll talk to customers, and customers will say, look, I want said solution from vendor A. Salesperson B says, customer B wants said solution from vendor B, and so on and so forth. And then, you find that you've just got this really big spread and no particular specialization. And then, you have other partners that will build a specialization, be it on Zscaler or someone else, and say, this is what we do, and lead with it. And then, of course, Murphy's Law is their sales team say, but the customer wants something else. So it's a really nuanced one. I guess the answer for me, Brendan, would be, for any partners that are out there listening, is, really understand, how the vendor fits into your world. Really understand the roadmap. Really understand the investment the vendor is going to make in trying to deliver those services and outcomes in your business. Think about, Horizon 1 maybe being the next 12 to 18 months, and Horizon 2 being, 24 months out, and the investment you're going to make, because deal cycles are going to lag. And by the time you go out and find the opportunity, go through the contractual obligations, start deploying, you're already sort of 9 to 12 months in. So you're well into sort of Horizon 1. And, I think a couple of, problems that I'm seeing, that is kind of converging is, every vendor seemingly has a platform now. So, platforms are almost the new product, right? Like, organizations are collecting platforms, so to speak, and the convergence of platforms, inverted commas, vendors, converging on the one spot around, the buzzwords, the acronyms, that whether it's SASE or SSC or Zero Trust, and, it all looks and smells the same. So I certainly think from a partner perspective, it's really critical to understand that roadmap and then determine what's the available market opportunity. As always, what am I replacing in my portfolio or my catalog, my service catalog? Because there's nothing really net new. So even if you think about, SSE, a lot of the solutions are pretty much just displacing, perhaps networking looking different. So the MPLS looks different. The VPN estate looks different. The firewall estate looks different. So it's not really new money per se. It's just I'm repurposing, and my service catalog looks different. So for me, they're the sorts of questions that I like to ask and work through with our partners, and say, well, let's think this through, and then off the back of that, how do we get back to services? Which was a long-winded way of answering. If you've determined that there's sufficient scale and sufficient market available for you, well then that sort of starts ticking the box of saying, I've gone through the business case and I ought to start investing in that certification and services phase, because I'm satisfied that the opportunity is there, that I can transition my existing customers to the new world, that I can attract net new to the new world, and that over time I'm comfortable as a partner building professional services, building managed services, and starting that that pipeline process. And, I think, quite typical from vendors, Brendan, is, a partner may lean on partner services initially to get started, and then over time, do the shadowing. And as deals come on and they're closed successfully, and the mutual partnership grows, you start investing in more certifications and service creation. And, that's kind of the typical way to do it. And I think often as well, there's sort of third parties that vendors may white label just to give partners a head start, because, one of the other challenges even vendors face is getting, suitably qualified services people in our own organisation. So sometimes there's even a services backlog within vendors. So, you do have to rely on third parties.
And I think that's the thing, right? For to adequately answer that question, any MSP or VAR would have to understand their own positioning, right? They have to understand where they're looking to add value, where they're uniquely placed to add value, and then ask themselves that question: Do we need to be offering this other specific part of the puzzle, or is that best to be handled via our partner or a vendor of some sort? One thing I want to raise with you as well, or the next thing I want to raise with you, is just the MSPs being cut out of direct SaaS access. So what are you seeing in that space, and what do you think you're going to continue to see?
Whoa, that's an interesting one. It's got a lot of dimensions. So look, first things first, you've got to acknowledge that AWS, Azure, GCP, etc. They are just here to stay, right? They're a huge part of the ecosystem. And in my mind, they're almost becoming quasi-distributors. So we're seeing, more and more customers wanting to, say, for example, procure through, one of those marketplaces. So, AWS has got a pretty sophisticated way of doing that with their CPPO program. Azure a little bit less so. But increasingly customers are saying, they might have gone and done a contractual deal with AWS, for instance, to buy a certain amount from them. So, partners don't have a choice. So there's a couple of ways to look at it. So there's formal programs like AWS, Azure really sort of cuts the partner out where customer wants to go direct, so partners don't like that. But I think you got to sort of separate it from the resale through to what's available post sale, right? Which is the management of SaaS, because what I see is a lot of partners are trying to grapple with what does SaaS mean? There's a resale element, but what services can we create? And so surprisingly, even for Zscaler, there are a lot of services that partners can create, given we're a full SaaS vendor. So I'd urge partners to really explore what those services look like, because ultimately, whilst your customer might be procuring via one of those marketplaces, what I am seeing increasingly as well, particularly outside of the large enterprise customers, is most customers in other segments are looking for an outcome. So they're looking to outsource, which is great for partners. They just want the outcome. So they might buy because they get a better buy price through the through the AWSs and the Azures of the world, but they still want ongoing management. And it's just about trying to understand what that looks like. How do you stitch together your CrowdStrike deployment with your Okta deployment, with your Zscaler deployment? What are the services? What are some of the outcomes that you can provide to your customers? But also, to sort of think a little bit more laterally or abstract, perhaps. So, if we think about SaaS and some of the characteristics of SaaS vendors. So one thing about SaaS is it gives vendors an opportunity to push their updates really quickly, right? So just bang, update goes out. So all of a sudden, you and I walk in and we could be cloud administrators, or we could be in a partner, and Zscaler's put out an update overnight and there's 62 new features. And CrowdStrike has put out their release last week and there were 80 new features. And I think I heard in 2022 that AWS put through north of 2,000 new features.
Wow.
Right? So then you go, okay, wow, what does all that mean? I'm overwhelmed. Who's going to filter through those? Which of those features perhaps might be addressing really core vulnerabilities that absolutely must be taken up? Which one of those features might add something particularly beneficial to the customer, whether it's in terms of productivity or connectivity or what have you? Which of those features really, ho-hum, we can kind of just leave to the side? So, how do you sort of almost bake in that SaaS management? So not only in terms of the service creation being, managing integrations and all the alerts that come out. So what I am seeing is a lot of partners starting to sort of build a seam, a saw, because, SaaS can be noisy as well. So you're getting a ton of notifications and alerts if they're not configured right. So opportunity for doing all the config, opportunity for doing all the sort of config and management of, all the different alerts that are getting spat out, but then also the ongoing management. And then, one of the things about SaaS as well is that customers often, go over their thresholds, whether it's licensing or usage or however, particular SaaS vendor prices. So there's also an opportunity for partners that are managing this well to pick up ongoing incremental business monitoring, things like overages as well, right? So that's where I'd sort of be looking if I were a partner.
And in that sort of in that world of an increasingly complex SaaS ecosystem, are you seeing then that there is an increasing specialization of those mid-tier MSPs that are really looking to go deeper on a specific sort of, to be subject matter experts to a really deep level? Or are you finding that MSPs are stretching themselves super thin, trying to be everything to everyone, and ultimately not really nailing anything? I imagine it's a mixture of both, but are you seeing, one or the other sort of pick up steam?
So I'm seeing the specialists, as you alluded to. So, they might be, we do all things Microsoft. So we are absolutely, experts in Microsoft, or, we are experts, pure cloud, MSSP type players that just do this bit of cloud security. So, I am seeing that, or, we just do AWS, or we just do, cloud workload management. So certainly they're starting to spring up. And then, you've got the sort of more traditional, system integrators, service providers that might have, the big workforces that might have, managed and deployed the old legacy technology, who are trying to move to that new world. But, they perhaps, it's a bit like they've got a foot, on the pier and a foot on the boat, and they're caught, caught in between, because they've got all the legacy stuff, and they're trying to transition to the new world. Whereas if you think about the former type partners that just go, we're just going to be cloud specialists at this, and they're trying to pick the eyes out of customer opportunities for very specific niches. So I am seeing an increase in that, Brendan, definitely.
Okay, cool. And I think the thing with those specialists, though, they've probably got a couple of challenges. One, they have to really embrace the power of no, right? Like they have to, time and time again, as opportunities come up, go, sorry, that's just not what we do, or we can do most of that, but this is going to require you to engage with another partner. We have an ecosystem of partners that work with us where it falls outside of our core specialty. And I guess the other part they have to grapple with is just market education. If they do something very specific, how do they educate the market to know that that's a problem that needs solving, or that they're the best to solve that problem, and why? So I think there's it's not insurmountable at all. Obviously, it's doable, but it's just there's a slight nuance to being that type of an MSP.
Yeah, there is. And, one thing's for certain is the marketplace changes so quickly. So, something that I've seen of late and becoming really, really apparent is, say, partners that were, let's call them sort of connectivity, networking / SD-WAN specialists. So they were kind of on the SASE side. Then Gartner coined, SSE. So SSE being SASE without the A, all of a sudden the access bit is not that important. And, I've seen a really big uptick in, let's call them, SD-WAN MSPs that have gone and done lots of deployments, all of a sudden going, wow, we're actually not doing the whole, SSE bit, the security piece, everything's sort of out from the branch. And they've realized that they're sort of vulnerable because it's a critical area for the customer. They weren't doing it. So a lot of those partners are now trying to move into, the more sort of, cloud security piece. But of course they run into some pretty fierce competition, because you've got the specialists that were already there and saying, we saw this coming, years ago in some instances, and we're already here and marketing that way. And look, I agree with you. The marketing is a real challenge for everybody. I mean, if we, we're all in the industry, and we talk to our mates who are in different partners and different vendors and so on. And, I think customers are equally confused, Brendan.
Yeah, if we're confused, what hope have they got, right?
Yeah, and I mean, the analysts will start with a theme, and sort of zero trust at the moment being a really topical one, and so the analyst community start with that, and then the vendor community start with that, and the customers are like, well, we're not even finished our prior journey, let alone in a position to get in a zero trust, and then everyone's at the partners saying you've got to be positioning here. So that battle of mind shares a really tough one, and I think sometimes I'm more than happy to sit down with our partners and say, look, let's just have a relaxed conversation about what it all means, who does what our definition is of this, how we see this market, and if it works for your customers and your business, great. Because it's pretty busy out there, right? And I don't think a day goes by that we're not hit up on our our phones, on our LinkedIn, emails, white papers, download this, attend this
totally.
roundtable, listen to this expert, and it's pretty hard, I think, to differentiate. It is a lot, yeah. But, I think, sorry, just on that as well, I'd urge partners out there to leverage your partner managers in the vendors that you deal with. So, some vendors have got pretty sophisticated marketing engines. Zscaler's got a great partner portal, like lots of digital campaigns. So, there's a lot of self-help tools out there that, you can access. So, I just urge anyone that's listening to talk to your vendors about what support you can have from them, and, what campaigns you can run, and how much you can do digitally, which is obviously, the most scalable and most cost-effective way of trying to get your message out there. So, lots of vendors do that, including Zscaler.
Cool. I want to talk about the future of SD-WAN, since you brought it up just before as well. So Zscaler's got some interesting products on the horizon, and it seems to me from where I sit that where your product set is heading, and probably the market either following or alongside will move as well, is that the smarts are really moving away from the edge, going into the cloud, and the, I guess, the branch office connectivity and CPE piece is going to get less and less important. You guys at Vegas last year, it wasn't an announcement. I think it was a sort of a double down or covering off on some advancements to your branch connector. Is that what you guys are doing? You can correct me on this. Yeah, right. So where's that heading? And sort of going forward 5 years, how do you see SD-WAN evolving?
That's an interesting one because you kind of look at the technology mix for access. And, some will say MPLS is dead, for instance, right? And it's not, because depending on the applications you're trying to shift and depending on each organization, there's still a place for it, right? I say MPLS is going to look different. Some say, you don't need SD-WAN. Well, once again, it depends on, what your organization is doing, how your people work, all those sorts of things. Like, I'm a bit more pragmatic about it, Brendan, because, I think we can be in the industry and, you and I have the benefit of saying, we can work from anywhere, right? Work from home, work from a cafe, work from, a holiday house, whatever it is. But there's still a lot of the world's workforce don't have that luxury, right? But I think we can easily get swept up in it in the IT fraternity that, we're this really mobile workforce. But a lot of people still turn up, right, to a workplace. So it really depends on how that workplace is configured, the applications they're running, all sorts of things. And so SD-WAN is an interesting one because, and sort of harking through to my background, historically, I've sort of worked in application vendors. I've worked in, the sort of network type vendors, and now I'm in security. And, so some customers are only just making the move to SD-WAN. What's been really interesting is that with the COVID pandemic hitting us, the customers that perhaps might have been thinking about SD-WAN, when everyone was in lockdown for the best part of 2 years, they didn't have to do that. Now, some of them have just gone direct to, internet cloud-based security. So they've thought, well, our people were working really well and, things were secure and they weren't complaining about performance. So why do we even need SD-WAN? Right. So it's horses for courses, I think. And in future years, there's going to be opportunities for all those forms of, connectivity. I don't think it's as simple as saying, I've got my agent on my laptop as I sit here and I can walk anywhere and, I don't need SD-WAN. I'm just using internet. Yes, that's me, but I don't think it's going to be everyone. So I still think in 5 years' time, there's still going to be a need for sort of hybrid networking. If I think about a lot of the government customers that we see, they're still very slow adopters of cloud and, hybrid, and they've still got, lots of legacy assets and networking architectures. So I still see in 5 years there's going to be a lot of hybrid, and I'm not sure that it's going to be a full, sort of this is our edge, right? Your laptop and mine, and that's all you need. I can't see it, certainly within 5 years, maybe in the future, but I might be wrong. And by the way, I'm not, I don't speak for our product roadmap strategy at Zscaler, but that's just my, my personal opinion.
Fair enough. I mean, I think you're probably right. We've seen from the MPLS to SD-WAN, version, despite all the hype, despite all of the promised cost savings, it's still not universally adopted, and it comes back to it's not right for everyone, right? And also, it's a very different market in ANZ than America. So the cost saving drivers don't quite align between those two markets. So it depends on which market material you look at as to how real the drivers are. But I actually want to. So I want to move. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say on SD-WAN as well. It's interesting because it's given a lot of partners the opportunity just to essentially create the network, right? So I don't need the old service provider that was, providing the MPLS. But then also, you own the performance challenges. So all of a sudden, it's Brendan and John MSP, and we go out and provide choose an SD-WAN vendor, and we bang a couple of links and an SD-WAN device out in customer land. But then all of a sudden, if there's performance issues, it's on us to manage, right?
Mm.
So how much of those, how much of that is factored in, like the cost management, the customer tickets, trying to work out where problems lie. How much does that actually eat into our margin that we thought, so we sold an SD-WAN solution, what's left. So there's pros and cons.
Yeah, there's a massive SD-WAN vendor market out there, right? I know that Zscaler integrates with a lot of them as well. So there's a lot of people trying to, hustle to add a lot of functionality, a lot of value to justify its place in the market. I don't think it's going anywhere in a hurry. But again, it does, SD-WAN also does, and I'm sure so with the branch connector product or something like it, also provide a great way for MSPs to offset some of those challenges we discussed earlier with that rise of the marketplaces, et cetera, to add value, drive recurring revenue. And that's why I'm sure there'll be some out there looking to closely at what Zscaler is doing in that space and to see how they can get ahead of the curve.
Definitely. Absolutely.
All right, so let's sort of float on nicely to my next question, which is giving you a chance to do a bit of a plug for Zscaler. So we've talked a little bit about some of the challenges that are facing the MSP market. What is Zscaler doing in 2023 and obviously beyond to help MSPs achieve profitability and be competitive in the marketplace?
Yeah. So look, partners are our lifeblood. We're a partner-only organisation, so we don't deal direct. And we've got a very clearly defined internal view that partners are absolutely integral to the growth that we see ahead of our organisation in the next 3 years, and that comes down from Jay, our founder, through to our COO Dali, and all the way through our organisation. So we're investing in channel. We're investing. Let's call it in the cliche stuff, like your partner programs around dual reg and the like, but. The reality is, I think, our view and my view in our region is it's about education, and we've got to invest really heavily in being available for our partners to talk them through the transition, because, we've got to, we see the demand out in customers. What we need to do is then, essentially reverse engineer that back to partners and say, well, how does this fit into your business? And then also when we do that, we have to, once again, reverse engineer the partner's business to say, well, are you a partner that had, deployed, managed, sold some of these legacy technologies we're displacing? And what's the impact there? And how do we help you with that transition as well? If you're one of the sort of more recent, entrants, and by that I'll call it, the last sort of 5 to 7 years, and you're a cloud first, partner, you don't necessarily have all that. So really, we're spending a lot of time in talking to our partners about the use cases, where we see the technology future. We had an explosive growth profile over the last 3 years, so, benefited greatly from the whole work from home driven by the COVID pandemic. But that wasn't luck. It was, great architecture well before me, and the business being in the right place at the right time for the unfortunate moment we all lived through. So, what we're doing is really talking to our partners about where we see the future, where we see the customer use cases that are going to be acute, that we can solve jointly, and then talking to them about how we can, solve that and what it looks like, and how we can help them monetize it. That's sort of my belief, Brendan, that we've got to do that to help them really invest, and we're going to go a lot deeper with our partners. So we want to, partner with the right partners. So we're not a volume vendor in that, we're going to have hundreds and hundreds of partners. We'd prefer to have partners where we sit down and map out an agreed course of action, a bit of reciprocity. This is what we bring to your business, and we'd like to see some of that reciprocated. And we jointly invest. So, we'll invest where partners invest in us. And, all the while, we'll continue to try and make improvements. So we are introducing changes to our MSP program to make it easier to become an MSP. We're increasing velocity type programs. So, one of the things I have heard from the industry is that Zscaler is perceived as a in the domain of the large enterprise and the mega caps, which we are. But we've got tons of great customers, and I've got we've got some terrific partners that take us down into the sort of 250 to 1,000 seats here in this country, of which there are many in Australia and New Zealand. We've got dozens and dozens of great use cases in there. So it's education, it's making it easier to work with, and it's also really trying to articulate the value that we are providing to customers. And I'm trying to say, if you're a partner out there and listening, value is an interesting thing, because some organisations and vendors will lead on price, and some will lead on value. And I've often heard comments that hey, said solution might be more expensive than an alternative one. And my question is, like, relative to what? If you think about the Medibank breach, the day they announced their breach, their share price dropped, was about at 1.85 billion on their market cap. Their remediation costs were 25 to 30 million, and it's still ongoing, right? So, relative to what?
Yeah.
So,
it's interesting. And I want to come back to Optus, Telstra, Medibank, and how that's impacted on the market and your business. But just on the reciprocity bit, I can attest to that firsthand, because Jay, your CEO, he cannot be a man who has a lot of spare time, and yet after we helped Zscaler with its entrance into the New Zealand market, he put together a video for us where he talked about his experience going into that space and how he helped, and that stood out to me as a really, really tangible example of how it's not one-way traffic, and right to the top of the organization. So, and I've seen you guys work with the Distillery, one of our partners over in New Zealand. They were promoting the Distillery very heavily in New Zealand, and I've seen that you guys have put a lot of effort into helping them in turn. So it's very much a partnership model, and I'd back you on that. What I wanted to touch on as well, though, is just the integrated solutions with other vendors. You'd given me a heads up on that previously. I just want you to go into that a little bit and talk about what that looks like.
Yeah. So, once again, getting back to the value that a vendor provides to the overall business, right, to the MSP, to the system integrator, my view is that a vendor has to provide more than $1 worth of value. So, one Zscaler dollar has to equal 3 or 5x of other dollars, of other things on your service catalog of pull through. So, we integrate. So let's go back upstream into the network. We've got really deep integrations with, most of all SD-WAN vendors, but in particular, the leading vendors that, partners seem to work with, whether it's VeloCloud, Viptela, so on and so forth, right? Fortinet and so on. So, we integrate really well there. Great integrations with the endpoint, IDAM vendors as well. We work really well with, things like Splunk. We've got incredible integrations with Microsoft. I think we're in the top 5 ISV vendors for Microsoft globally. So, ultimately, integrations is something that our business is really strong on. And it allows our partners to create some great outcomes. So, it might be IDAM plus endpoint plus Zscaler plus, could it be plus Splunk for logs or what have you, same with Microsoft. And it's something that, I think every partner out there should really be thinking about, explore those integrations. That's what I'd be urging them. Like, make sure they're real, make sure they're there, explore the business value. So, there's not only integrations, there's also motivations. So, for instance, CrowdStrike sellers are really motivated to work with Zscaler because we've got a great commercial relationship. Microsoft sellers are really commercially motivated to work with Zscaler because we've got a great commercial relationship. And that adds value for the partner. So there's multiple levels, I think, Brendan. It's not only integrations, it's motivations, which often drive behaviors in the marketplace. And ultimately, even with Zscaler, we talk about, we've got some really high quality data on our upsell rates. So we know that once we position our solutions and our platform to customers, we've got a really nice uplift, which, helps our partners with their quota because, reality is as the year turns, the sales teams turn up and the quota goes up, right, commensurately. So, you've got nice incremental roadway with Zscaler. You've got the ability to create services over time with Zscaler, but then also, we work in lockstep with lots of other vendors. So you're adding, perhaps a Zscaler $1, $1 of your own in services, and let's say $1 of CrowdStrike equals $3, right? So much better commercial outcome, and it's an outcome that the customer is looking for as well.
Cool. All right. Well, that leads me on, or back to, because you touched on it before, the Optus. Who else was there? Telstra, Medibank. I don't know. There's been so many hacks lately, which is, I guess, kind of the point. Are you seeing that as a result of these relatively high-profile cyber attacks, that there is a greater awareness of the problem that needs to be addressed in the public and within business, or are you finding there's a creeping sort of acceptance or passive acceptance to this is just life now? We just have to realize that nothing's secure and we get on with it.
Yeah, I think there's a few aspects of that, right? There's your personal aspect as an individual, and then there's the Zscaler hat, and then I guess there's the IT industry hat. So I think there's a few aspects. So like I know lots of people that were impacted by the Optus breach, but I wasn't. And some of them are quite apathetic about it. They're like, who cares? Someone's got my license. It's just little old me, and not worth too much money. And so what? Who can be bothered? Similarly with the Medibank breach, which I was affected by. Once again, some people are going, oh well, someone knows I have my wisdom teeth out, or I've got a bung knee or shoulder or something. Who cares, right? So there's, and that's troubling, because if there's a general lack of apathy, that means that when people as individuals go into an organisation, perhaps if they don't really feel that it's ho hum, it puts organisations at risk.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of aspects to that. So I think education is a real key. I've got 2 teenage daughters, one that's 19, one that's 15. I talk to them about the perils of, social media, TikTok, data retention. They're like, oh, Dad, leave me alone. So, and I don't know if that's typical of a lot of teenagers that age.
I think so.
But, they're going to be 20-somethings, right, working in organisations. So if they're quite carefree about security, it undermines the whole premise of what a CIO is trying to do, what a partner's trying to do, right? Because we're vulnerable. Look, there is an increasing spend. I'm seeing it driven more by boards that are looking at their posture and just looking at it and saying, right, I might be, in a similar industry. My direct competitor was impacted. What if that happened to us? Obviously, increasing government regulation. So a lot of it's driven by board. I think a lot of it is driven probably more from what I can see at assurance, risk, compliance, vulnerabilities, all that kind of stuff. Probably a lot more on the consulting side for partners, Brendan, which is sort of where we sit. We're a little bit downstream, and it's more sort of where we're helping solve the challenge. So we plug the gap. But yeah, there's definitely the partners that I speak to that have got consulting practices. They are literally booked well in advance and running at 100% utilization and can't find enough people. So there is a big awareness, and organisations are spending significant sums to try and address it. But as I said, if people are apathetic,
yeah, I think it's a great call, because I think you make a really good point there, that the generation that's about to come into the workforce, your daughter, your oldest daughter, and all the other school leavers out there who have this passive acceptance, like, no, TikTok's just gathering everything I'm putting up, and everything on my phone is basically there. But they are a risk center. We see that most applications are secure. It's the way they're used that potentially isn't, and that really puts a lot of businesses in between sort of a rock and a hard place. Like, the user behavior is one of the hardest things to police, right? And to safeguard against. So I guess that leads on to something I know you guys are really big on, which is that whole avoiding lateral spread and zero trust, right? If you can't get that 100% right, you have to limit the impact a poor decision can make. And I guess that sort of leads on nicely to that question around that zero trust concept. I've talked about this before, but I know Zscaler is huge on it, but I also know so is Palo Alto. Everyone's trying to own that term. So I guess 2 questions. One is, how important is that term to Zscaler? And second, how well is it understood, do you think? Because it seems to me that the definition is somewhat of a floating one from vendor to vendor.
Yeah. So 2 questions. One, it's critically important. It's in our DNA, and it's at our heartbeat. And we've launched the 1 True Zero campaign globally to really talk to the customers and partners around what zero trust really means. For anyone that's interested, the term was actually coined by Forrester. So if you sort of look up Forrester's definition of zero trust, which they've now published, it was actually a Forrester term. So that's sort of point one. It's absolutely at the epicenter of who Zscaler is, what we do, and how we go forward. And then, we feel there's an obligation to talk to the marketplace. So, our definition of zero trust is we connect, our users to applications and not the network. And, what's evident is any technology that connects a user to a network is at risk. So, if we hark back to the Medibank breach, the CIO at Medibank actually acknowledged and applauded the hackers. And, he said, hey, you guys are very clever at what you do. And, you can see you've accessed this via the VPN. So any vendor that's relying on technology that connects you to a network. So if, you take a sort of firewall that's a pass-through device, you get past the firewall, you're still on network, right? And you've got that lateral spread. So, for anyone out there that's trying to think about it, very simply, we connect users to applications, not the network. And that's a key difference. And we'll be spending a lot of time educating the marketplace on how we do what we do and why it mitigates, the risks that are out there. And that zero trust is, that zero trust definition is what, we're driving.
I remember hearing Jay talk on another podcast, and he described the concept of a zero trust as if you walk as a person into a building, you go to reception, you say, I'm here to meet XYZ. They go, cool, off you go, and just see you through, and you're into the office, and you can go to any room you like, and you can walk around until you're finished, and then you walk back out. That's standard old school, firewalling basically. Whereas zero trust is you go to that same front desk, they go, cool, here's a badge, here's a security guard. That security guard will walk with you to room 22. Once you leave room 22, he will walk you back to the reception, and then you'll leave. And that's basically the difference. And that always stuck with me as a very easy to understand sort of description of the concept of zero trust.
Absolutely.
All right. Hey, look, that'll probably be enough for this morning. So I know you have to run. Leading into the new year, though, is there anything that you want to let us know, or anything you want to plug before I let you go?
No, I think, look, we're pretty good. I mean, we're going to plug, we've just launched this week our One True Zero campaign, which is essentially we want to own the zero trust space, if you will. So through thought leadership and educating the industry. Actually, we have launched a zero trust certification. So that's something I'd love to plug.
Okay.
As an industry, we want to provide an industry certification. So, just like there's a lot of people in the industry that are CCIE, we want to be sort of zero trust certified. So we're doing that, and I'll get, accreditation badges on LinkedIn and certifications and the like. So, we want to help the industry understand what zero trust is. So they're probably the two plugs for me.
Great. All right. Strong way to finish off. John, thanks for joining us.
No worries. Thanks so much, Brendan. All right.